Hey everyone, and welcome to Home Chats with Haley, a new video interview series where I sit down to talk with many of the extraordinary people that I've had the pleasure of meeting since coming on staff at St. Thomas Anglican Church in Athens, Georgia. Our hope is that this will be another way for us to stay connected, challenged, and encouraged.
Hey everyone, I'm Haley Allen, the Director of Family Ministries at St. Thomas Anglican Church, and joining me today is Summer Gross. She is a spiritual director, inner healing minister, and an Anglican priest. And my first experience meeting you was when you came to preach at St. Thomas, which was amazing. You have a website called A Thirst for God, as well as hosting the Presence Project podcast, and you are a regular contributor to their online content. So I have discovered that recently, and that was one of the questions I wanted to ask you first was, tell me more about the Presence Project. What is it? How did it get started? And what's your role in that?
Yeah, so about 10 years ago, I started teaching a class that went really deep into our lies and our wounds. It was kind of like Discipleship 901. That's kind of how I described it, because people actually had to do a lot of inner work. But I noticed that there were quite a few people that weren't ready to do that with God because they had trust issues, or they still struggled with the character of God and how much God loved them. They were still kind of seeing God as a reflection of their dad or of their mom. And so I started recognizing that there was a need to do pre-work before that, which really gave us time to soak in the love of God, to learn how to rest in God, to learn to receive God,
Yeah.
and be positioned for His presence. So I started doing a lot of what I'm doing in the Presence Project around like as pre-classes. I'd really push these practices hard at the very beginning so that people could hopefully gain a strong enough footing of trust in the Lord that they could go back to those places without getting re-traumatized.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I kept waiting for this to be a book.
Yeah.
Kept waiting and kept waiting and kept waiting, and did kind of all the things that the publisher tells you to do. And finally, about a year ago, November, I sensed the Lord say, why don't you just be generous with this material? Why don't you just start giving it away? And I felt like that was the right thing to do. I love the podcast format even more than a book.
Yeah.
If you've ever read books about spiritual practices, they can really fall flat. There can be a real sense of reading the left brain information, but spiritual practices is right brain relational work. And just reading about it doesn't do anything anyways. So I love the podcast format. I love creating space and time to position people for the presence of God so that they can learn slowly to rest in God and to move from a purely left brain way of thinking about God, of information and theology, which is also important. We're setting up the foundation. We have to know the character of God. We need to know scripture. But then what's next?
Right.
A lot of people are asking, I thought there was a relationship involved in this, and yet I can't seem to sense that relationship, that type of thing. Or I thought I was supposed to find my security in Christ.
Mm-hmm.
How do I do that?
Mm-hmm.
And so these practices, which are ancient contemplative practices that I've done a lot of study in, as well as some neuroscience, when those two things come together, we are able to go from left brain wonderful information into relationship with God and explore a deeper relationship.
Absolutely. And speaking to the full podcast format, I know and really it's just been within the past couple of months, but when I've started to listen to it, you're consuming it in these like bite-sized chunks, for lack of a better word. And I know that there have been times where my counselor will give me a book. And I'm like, you know that it's going to take me about a year because I'm going to read one chapter. My world is going to be turned upside down. I'm going to have to wrestle with this for probably 3 months. And then I'll be ready emotionally to face the next chapter. And I think there's that, and as a reader, there's that pressure, like, I've got to finish this book. I have to read this book. And that can just be so much at one time. And if you're only, if you're just, consuming it with your left brain, then it doesn't give you that pacing that I find so helpful with your podcast.
Oh, I'm so glad. Yeah, I love creating just that table. Essentially, for me, it's like setting a table so that other people can spend time with God, and then I kind of can remove myself to the sidelines and just watch the relationship that begins to happen. It's really what a spiritual director does in a lot of ways.
That's amazing. So one of the things bouncing off of that I've been seeing that you've put out on social media a lot lately is, I don't know if I'm saying this correctly, Lectio Divina.
Yeah, it's Lectio Divina, and it goes all the way back to Saint Benedict in the 600s. It's a fascinating practice. So essentially, in the rule of Saint Benedict, he has 2 time periods every day where they're supposed to be doing spiritual study. And what he meant by spiritual study was Lectio Divina. It's come down through the centuries as this Lectio Divina practice. And it just means divine reading. And what I take, in a very, very simple way, it just means slowing down the word enough for us to really soak in it and then be transformed by it. So it's not Bible study. It's not supposed to be Bible study, but it's Act 2 after Bible study. We desperately need the Bible study in order to create the context to understand what's going on in the Word. But after that, we want the Word to just really marinate in it. As one Lectio Divina person said, it's like keeping a lozenge in your mouth and slowly savoring it. And so Lectio Divina is often like 5 verses at a time or even less, and slowing it down so that we can encounter each word in a powerful way.
Yeah, I think that particularly, at least for me personally, has been very appropriate in this time for, I would say, probably most people, a lot of anxiety. Even if I'm exhausted, I've found myself laying down at night and I'm like, oh, cannot sleep. The thoughts are racing. And the past few nights, I've been doing that, and it's amazing how quickly I fall asleep, how much better I'm sleeping. And then you wake up in the morning and it's that your brain has been processing that all night, that's slowing down. And so I think, can you just speak to that, how people can use that practice now in the season that we're in?
Oh, I love that question so much because I've been thinking about it for a very long time, and there is neuroscience behind it as well. There is an idea in the last 15 to 30 minutes before you go to bed. It's called hypnagogia. Like your brain literally wires in a different way in that last 15 minutes before you go to bed. So if you are like consuming all the coronavirus information before you go to bed, you're going to wake up with knots in your shoulders, a knot in your stomach, And as if you've been eating fear all night long, your dream life will come in and out of that. So paying attention to what happens in our body when we're consuming this material is important. But yeah, when we spend time slowing down to meditate on the word before we go to sleep, we give God an opportunity to literally wire our brain with the word.
It's amazing. I think that that's some really simple and very practical advice for anybody of any age. And kind of bouncing off of that, speaking of different ages, my last question is regarding your status as a mother of three. They're all middle school and high school age, correct?
Yeah, I've got a 15-year-old, a 13-year-old. So she's in like 7th to 8th. She's homeschooled, and then a 10-year-old.
The baby whisperer and the best volunteer, both of them, the youngest two, that we have in St. Thomas. I have loved getting to know them. And you homeschool two of them, correct?
So Cademan and Madeline, Cademan was homeschooled until this year. And then Madeline's still homeschooled. Xavier, I homeschooled briefly for 2 years, and he's been at public school. He's super social, as you know, and just wants to connect with everyone. So this can be really hard for him.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my goodness. Yeah. So I think it's probably fair to say that for people like you that are experienced with this homeschool type rhythm, and equally for those who aren't, that there are some really unique challenges facing parents regarding anxiety. So as a mom, do you have any last piece of advice on how they can fight that anxiety that I'm sure most of them are facing?
Yeah, yep. So, a couple different things. One is giving people a chance to name their anxiety. So, even having a feeling wheel at home that you might pass around and say, how's everybody doing today? Show me where you are on the wheel. Can be extremely helpful because science shows that just naming an emotion can integrate it into our brain. Giving kids a chance to talk as much as they want to about what's going on with them can be extremely helpful. Giving yourself a lot of self-compassion because there's been a lot of loss.
Yes.
Even if they're small losses or seemingly small losses, there's been a lot of loss. And giving yourself space to grieve, that each loss deserves an equal and corresponding grieving time.
Absolutely.
But having time, two things, having time to maybe do a high-low around the dinner table. What was your high of the day? What was your low of the day? And then building rituals into your day, whether it is morning prayer. Right now we're doing evening prayer, taking walks together, making dinner together. Maddie and I have been putting on a mask at night, like at bedtime, and watching a bit of a movie together and, smelling that mask and just enjoying cuddling and that type of thing. But having small domestic joys at this time can be such a gift.
I love that. Well, I love all of that advice. I've never used a feeling wheel before. Where would somebody access something like that if they were interested?
The person who put this together, her last name was Wilcox, Wilcox. And you can find it, you can put in feeling wheel on Google and then press images and it'll come right up. But it's super helpful for helping people to integrate what's going on. And the truth is that every day we're feeling 100 different things and it keeps changing. And just being okay with the fact that we've never been here before. None of us have ever been here before. none of us know how to quote unquote negotiate this gracefully.
Yep.
It's going to affect us in different ways at different times of the day. And being okay with that fact, giving ourselves self-compassion, giving our children self-compassion of what's going on inside of them. And that feeling wheel can be really helpful for that.
That's wonderful. Summer, thank you so much for sitting down and talking with me. This was wonderful. I think I'll enjoy myself going back and rewatching and maybe taking some notes on everything that you had to say. I'm so grateful for you. I'm so grateful to have met you. And for those of you that have watched this, make sure to follow Summer on Facebook. Check out her website, athirstforgod.com, and check out her work with the Presence Project.
For sure. And if people appreciate those Lectio Divinas and they're looking for more, I have a YouTube channel with over 100 of them that they can access them under Rev Summer Joy Growth.
Awesome. And we'll put a link to all of those things in this video as well, for sure.
Thank you so much. It was great to be with you, Haley.
Thank you. It was good to talk to you. See you soon.
Okay, bye.